they knew that Nate was still under contract for them. Okay, so like Fertitta, there's two different people who are talking here. Okay, like who's smarter, Joe Silva or fucking Fertitta? Obviously, Lorenzo Fertitta is operating at a level that is 100 times higher than Joe fucking Silva. Okay, so when Lorenzo says stick to that number, he's not saying that, he's not like, in his mind, he's not like, oh yeah, we're gonna stick to that number forever, no matter what. Lorenzo puts that offer together, right? And he's like, okay, but look, share this with him. You know, and in his mind, he's not thinking like that this necessarily makes sense. He is putting something out there that maybe Nate will accept. But he also knows that if he does reject the offer, he still has time to offer him more money because he still has another fight under contract. It's not like if he turns it down, he could just go turn around and go sign with Strikeforce. They have him under contract for another fight. So all the way up until when he fights his last fight on the contract, they can still negotiate with him. So Joe Silva might not understand that. He's like, yeah, I lowballed him. And like, as a matter of fact, Joe Silva clearly doesn't understand that, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. Is like, you have Lorenzo here and you have Joe Silva here. Joe Silva says, okay, yeah, we'll put that out there. And if he doesn't take it, we'll stick him on the undercard and we'll devalue him. Lorenzo is saying, stick to this number. And in the back of his head, I know what he's thinking because it's what I'm thinking. Lorenzo's smarter than I am. I'm just smarter than Joe Silva, clearly. I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm saying stick to this number, but if he rejects it, then we can still negotiate with him. I'm not going to say that to Joe Silva because I don't trust him to be able to properly negotiate, knowing that he has a bigger bank back there to offer him more money. I would rather have this dumbbell who I have as my matchmaker think that this is the best and final offer because it increases my likelihood that Nate will take the deal. Now, me, Lorenzo, Dana, we know we'll offer him more money if he doesn't take it, but we don't need this front Dunsky to know that because we want him to communicate that this is the best and final. Okay, so that's what's really going on. When you read between the lines of that email, and I realize like everybody's, oh, look, they lowball. If you really want to understand what's actually going on for the big boys, that's what's going on. All right, so there's a big story about the leaked emails that have came out between Joe Silva, Dana White, and I believe the Fertittas from early days. This is connected to the lawsuit, and this is a big expose of them communicating with each other, sabotaging Nate Diaz's career. This is put out by John Nash, who is a reporter who covers this stuff a lot for Bloody Elbow. I just kind of perused his Twitter. He does a lot of other sports-based stuff. And he also, I found, had a motion from Endeavor related to getting a new portion of the class action lawsuit dismissed. So I'm going to show you guys the leaked emails that demonstrate that they sabotaged Nate Diaz, that they were acting nefariously, that they're a monopoly, and that the UFC are the bad guys. I'm going to show you that email, and I'm going to talk about that, which should properly set up for the second part of the video, which is this is going to be legal heavy, you know. It's going to be legal heavy, but bottom line, I will be able to define this stuff for you. I'm going to tell you exactly what this stuff means. I'll show you what Endeavor is trying to do over here, which is separate specifically from the UFC in the second half lawsuit piece. And again, the email about Nate Diaz, this has to have been leaked by the plaintiffs, which means they believe that this demonstrates nefarious business practices by the UFC. Okay, so we're going to get into all of this, and I'm going to give you a completely unbiased opinion on all of this because this, like I said, I've dealt with a lot of contracts, a lot of fucking lawsuits, a lot of stuff where I have experience doing this stuff. So that's what we're going to do. Now, if you like the content, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I specifically put this beanie on, this Venom beanie, because A, my hair is super messed up right now and I was about to go to bed, but also I just feel like it's hilarious for me to be wearing this while I'm educating people on legal language and the actual meaning of these things. Like all the comments on Twitter are like, put it in layman's terms, you know, and I'm reading them like, you don't understand what this means. But anyway, so I'm going to put it in layman's terms the best way that I can. So again, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and let's rock and roll. All right, so this is the start. So this is the big low-hanging fruit story that people are talking about. Leaked emails expose UFC's attempt to sabotage Nate Diaz after lowballed contract was rejected. All right. So again, read that. This is how it is being framed by whoever released this and, you know, whoever the original journalist that dropped it. This is an expose. Like, that's what you're looking at, right? So let's look at what was actually said. All right. So let me pull this over just a little bit. For context, UFC's been embroiled in a class action lawsuit. Yada yada. Leaked emails provide a glimpse into the contentious relationship between Diaz and the UFC. Notably, Diaz, in his pursuit of opportunities beyond the UFC, declined multiple contract offers from the organization. All right, so here is the email that was leaked. That is this big. It's this big gotcha. All right. So here is what it says. This is from Joe Silva to Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta, and this was filed 11/30/23. So this was just filed, right? And the email is from April 20th, 2010. Okay, so this is way back then. Joe Silva was still the matchmaker. He was still doing contracts, etc. So the highlighted part is the part that they think they got him on a big gotcha on. Quote from Joe Silva: "I lowballed them on purpose the first offer, knowing they would turn it down. How about I come back with 29 and 29, 32 and 32, 35 and 35, 38 and 38. If they turn it down, I put him in a prelim against a really tough guy for his last fight." Joe. Okay, so before I give my take on that, let's read everything that led up to this, because this is all really important. All right. So you have Lorenzo Fertitta, who says, "So I guess we will hang tight." Okay, actually, I'm sorry. Let me go back to the beginning. So Cesar Gracie, who is Nate's agent at the time, he says, "We want a 1-year contract, 42 plus 42, if you can get him another fight in that year. These numbers are substantially less than what Strikeforce will offer. They saw his last fight at 24 and 24 and alluded that he would be making twice as much with them. Nathan has instructed me that he would like to remain with the UFC, and yes, I am aware of the generous bonuses Dana has given Nathan." Okay, so I obviously personally know Caesar. That email from Caesar that's good business. That's him doing a good job. He is politely laying out that they almost certainly have a better offer. The reason why he has to word it that way is because it is illegal for them to be negotiating with another organization while he's still under contract with the UFC. So he can't say they have offered us 48 and 48, right? Like he can't say that, even though there's a high probability that Strikeforce has directly spoken to them about numbers, because why would you not? As long as there's no written record. I mean, I don't know this at all, but I'm just saying, like, why would you not? If you're in those two guys' positions, you're just talking. But technically it is illegal I'm sorry, not illegal is wrong. It violates the terms of the contract for them to be negotiating with another organization. But so Caesar knows that he can make 48 at Strikeforce. So he goes back to the UFC and he's like, "Listen, Nate wants to fight with you guys. Like, he wants to stay at UFC. Why don't we do 42 and 42? At the time, Nick Diaz is in Strikeforce, so they're negotiating on good faith over there. He wants to stay there. He's acknowledging the bonuses, because obviously the UFC is going to point out that bonuses change what you're comparing. It's like, okay, yeah, we offered you 35 and 35, but Nate made this bonus last year, which actually bumped up his total pay to XX, which means he made this much, right? So, like, this is a very strong, totally normal, non-confrontational, good negotiating email from Caesar, all right? And Joe Silva says to Dana White, "Do we let Strikeforce pay him the 48 and 48, or do we give them what they want?" He was making 24 and 24. I offered 27 and 27, 30 and 30, 33, 33, and 36, 36. Lorenzo says, "So I guess we hang tight at the number offered. He should be willing to take less money from us. Plus, Strikeforce probably made that offer before shit hit the fan on Saturday. He got 5 structured bonuses in the last 8 fights, plus discretionary totaling $250K, which he certainly won't get in Strikeforce." Okay, this is just like these are just no, this is all completely above board, for the record. Okay, and then so Joe Silva responds to Fertitta and says, "I lowballed them on purpose on the first offer, knowing they would turn it down. How about I come back with 29, 29, 32 plus 32, or 32 and 32, 35 and 38, 38. If they turn it down, I put him in a prelim against a really tough guy for his last fight." So here is how I am reading this. I don't know this for sure. when he first said the 29, 29, 32, 32, 35, I thought he was laying out the numbers he was going to go back and forth on the negotiation for. I actually don't think that's what it is. I think that he is actually laying out a 1, 2, 3, 4 fight deal, a 4-fight deal. And he's saying on the first one, it'll be 29, 29. Second one, it'll be 32 and 32. Third one, 35 and 35. Fourth one, 38, 38. Okay. And so all he's saying is like he gave them a low offer knowing they would turn it down. In all seriousness, this sounds more like Joe Silva trying to demonstrate to Fertitta that he's doing a good job, right? Like I think that's what that sounds like to me. And him saying if they turn it down, I put him in a prelim against a really tough guy for his last fight. Okay, so let me go back to the Fertitta message first. So Fertitta says that hang tight the number because Strikeforce probably give him that offer before shit hit the fan Saturday. I don't know exactly what happened at Strikeforce when shit hit the fan, but clearly there was something that might have changed the financial landscape for Strikeforce and may have changed their ability to deliver on a specific deal. But then he got 5 structured bonuses in his last 8 fights plus discretionary totaling $250K, which he certainly will not get at Strikeforce. Okay, so $250K divided by 8. All right, I'm embarrassed. Like, I could do that actually. It's a little over 30,000 per, right? So that he said. So what Fertitta's saying is, all right, well, so if he averages what he's been averaging here, then at that 32 and 32, he's actually going to make. So that's 64 plus an additional 32. So that would be 64, 96. So he'd be getting 96, which is almost exactly what he's being offered at Strikeforce, right? So candidly, honestly, when you do those numbers, considering that they rely on, like if I were Nate, right? If I was Nate or Caesar and they came back with this exact argument, if Joe Silva came back with a 29, 32, 35, and 38, and then they attached exactly what Lorenzo had said about his $250K over the last eight fights, which essentially would make it to where they would be UFC would be offering Nate more money in the third and fourth fight than the equivalent offer from Strikeforce, which ends up being $96,000 also. However, it's not equivalent at all because what I would say is I totally understand, and I understand the math you're using to get there. The thing is that math relies on Nate both winning and continuing to receive bonuses, which is outside of our control. This is a $96,000 guaranteed. Well, I'm sorry, it's 48 guaranteed instead of 29. Okay, so like just on the very first fight, like I can only bank. I'm just saying what I would say. It's like we can only bank on the guaranteed money. The guaranteed money that we are up against here is 29 against 48. You're talking about a 40+% increase what they're offering versus what you guys are offering. We want to fight here, but we need to make it reasonable. It's unreasonable to ask us to rely on best case scenarios, both bonus and win, to equal what we'll make over there by just winning. Or worst case scenario, we lose, and now we're taking 29 instead of 48. It's a huge gap. That would be my response. That said, this email chain is a complete and total fucking nothing burger. There is nothing here. Absolutely nothing. Zero. This is actually laughable that they put this out. Like this is embarrassing that they put this out. Real talk. This is embarrassing. If this is what these guys think are big gotchas, then they have dog shit in this case. Okay? This is nothing. I lowballed him on the first offer. They're negotiating. They're fucking negotiating, dude. And then when he says, if they turn it down, I'll put him in a prelim against a really tough guy for his last fight. Okay, well, if they turn it down, then why is he turning it down? Because he's going to go fight for Strikeforce, a competitor organization. Okay? Like crystal clear. If he turns it down, he's going to fight for Strikeforce, which at that time was not a nobody. That's when they had Ronda, they had they had Nick Diaz, like they had people over there. They had Tyron Woodley, they had Luke Rockhold. And so if Nick Diaz I'm going to go fight over there, Nate Diaz I'm going to go fight for the competitor. Well, what are they going to do with their last fight? They're going to give him a headliner. They're going to give him some really sweet matchup and just boost it, and then spend a lot of money on marketing, build Nate Diaz's profile as big as they can so that he can go be as damaging as possible to their business. This is fucking stupid. This is a joke is what this is. This is a fucking joke. Anybody who thinks that this is something heavy that's going to play negatively against, if this ends up being a factor in this class action lawsuit and this support, this helps the plaintiffs, that's fucking bullshit, and it should throw shade on their entire case because this is nothing. Okay? Yes, the UFC was not making a good offer here compared to what they were being offered at Strikeforce. And they're saying if he decided not to take it, they were going to devalue him. My opinion, not necessarily a great decision on the UFC's part, but I have the benefit of now we know what Nate Diaz turned into, obviously. I mean, well, for anybody looking at this, of course, that playing fast and loose with Nate over an amount of money like this obviously is, not correct. But again, here's the other thing is I'm obviously very experienced with this stuff. And so going through offers and thinking through the angles comes very naturally to me. I think that, let's say hypothetically that the $250K in bonuses, let's just say that the bonuses did equal a bigger number. Let's say that it was a little bit more to where you didn't have to rely on all of these optimistic outcomes to get to a place where the UFC was going to be paying equivalent money. I think that relying on that when negotiating with these guys might not necessarily always work. You know what I mean? Because you're just like, hey, dude, but you also got these bonuses. I just think it's expecting a lot of some of these guys to be able to think that through and go, okay, yeah, I guess I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, in terms of, but again, this was just not a very good offer is all. In comparison, if they knew for sure Strikeforce was offering 48. That said, I don't know what he's talking about when he says that's before shit blew up on Saturday, which obviously could drastically shift the strength of the other organization. If they know that they're all of a sudden going to be in serious financial trouble or some other thing that's going to happen, he's like, they're fucked. If it's something like that, then I totally understand. Stick with this offer. But if there was a solid 48 over there, anyway, you understand what I'm saying. So this is bullshit. This is a complete and total bullshit story. This is nothing. It's a fucking nothing burger. Okay. Now, I want to go over to this other part of this that I found while I was reading this, which is this. All right. So let me actually close this out just so we can show you what this is. Okay, so this is the Defendant Endeavor Group's Defendant Endeavor Group Holdings second motion to dismiss and memorandum of points and authorities in support. All right. So that probably sounds like a bunch of blobbity bloop bloop. See, I told you right here, this guy, oh, you guys can't see it on yours, but it's kindly in layman's terms. So this is the motion that Endeavor is filing to dismiss this additional added on period that the civil case or the class action is trying to do, where they're basically the original class action went up to 2017. There's now a second one that would take them all the way to the present. So this, as I read it, is Endeavor trying to disconnect from all of the stuff that is inside of the original class action, because they're like, we weren't even involved in any of this stuff. Right? They're saying, we bought this company. We weren't even involved in any of this stuff. That said, there's also a lot of stuff in here that frames the UFC and, Zuffa and Endeavor's position in a way where a smart person can evaluate this and kind of go, all right, is this a solid lawsuit or not? Because candidly, what I'm seeing here, and obviously I've only read the defense's side of this. Okay, so my opinion will probably be slanted that direction because I haven't seen the details on the other side. But when you read this side, this is very solid. This is a very solid argument for all of it. I mean, just bottom line. So, okay, so I'm going to read some of this. I mean, this video's already been going for 17 minutes. I imagine only people are still around who are into business and this kind of thing interests you. So we're going to get really heavy into business now. This is contract shit. And Or maybe you're around and you're like, Jesse always says he knows contracts. I guess we're going to find out. It's like, all right, well, here we go. Anyway, so intro Endeavor. So here's the beginning, and then you get into like supporting stuff. So Endeavor has no connection to them. I don't even like. First of all, let me look up what this like word they're like. I literally don't even know what that means. A market situation where there is only one buyer. Okay, a monopsony. So not a monopoly, a monopsony, which is a market situation in which there's only one buyer. Okay, so that's interesting, and that's like the big gotcha is that it's a monopsony, right? So let me read this first, and then I'll kind of give you my thoughts. All right, so Endeavor has no connection to the monopsony allegations in this case and should thus be dismissed. The plaintiff's own characterization, they intended to the complaint merely to carry forward in time the allegations they previously asserted in Lee versus Zuffa LLC about supposed conduct that long predated Endeavor's formation and full acquisition of Zuffa. So, layman's terms, they're saying the case that you are trying to attach this additional time frame to is based on actions that happened way before we were even involved. How can you just tack on this now additional years of time saying it's just a continuation of that case and bring us into it when the basis of that case is way before we even had anything to do with the company? Okay. The complaints in both cases allege that UFC embarked on and challenged campaign as early as December 2006, years before Endeavor existed, a decade before Endeavor bought a majority stake in UFC's owner Zuffa, and nearly 15 years before Endeavor acquired the remainder of Zuffa. UFC's scheme here, as the complainant reportedly calls it, is intended to be virtually identical to the conduct challenged in Lee versus... Again, all of this is saying they are trying to now extend this lawsuit from ending in 2017 now to going to present. And they're saying like, oh, it's just exactly the same as what was back then. And again, they're saying we weren't involved back then, so we shouldn't even be involved in this. Okay. Pretty short background. Okay, so now they're saying plaintiffs added Endeavor as a named defendant in Johnson, but gave it barely any more attention. The 3 short background paragraphs dedicated to Endeavor within the 151 paragraph complaint cannot support retaining Endeavor in this lawsuit. Those paragraphs woefully fail to allege any of the essential essential elements of the complaint's single count of monopsony, including monopsony power, anti-competitive conduct, and antitrust impact. Okay, so so I'm learning about monopsonies right now, and so what dictates that characterization. So monopsony power, anti-competitive conduct, and antitrust impact. To speak really intelligently about that, I would need to look into it. But so actually, I'm just going to stick to the stuff I know for now. They do not even allege that Endeavor participated in the market for purchasing fighter services. That was August 2016, and the remainder into April 2021, and allege that Endeavor produces and distributes UFC programming, manages UFC live events and experiences, and licenses UFC media and sponsorship rights, and runs a streaming platform for broadcasting UFC and Training Institute. Endeavor is not alleged to have possessed monopsony power and even to have independently participated in the supposed market for purchasing professional MMA services or to have harmed fighters in any way. Instead, plaintiffs contend that they were injured by the UFC's illegally obtained monopsony power that resulted in artificially suppressed compensation for competing in UFC bouts. Okay, so that's, listen, I figure most people already know this, but that is the core of their lawsuit, is saying that UFC consolidated the market so that they were not, and then through contracts and acquisitions, made it to where no one could ever go out and seek finding what their true market value was, because it made it to where the UFC, A, had them locked in, and B, had suppressed the rest of the market so well that like they were not ever able to get what they were truly worth, right? So it's like, they're saying the fighters should be making this much more, but the UFC is just taking all the profits and making it to where no one can do that, right? Like they're saying that they're doing it essentially leveraging monopoly or monopsony and antitrust stuff. Okay, so there's no claim that any sponsorship, intellectual property, or media rights that Endeavor sold, licensed, harmed fighter. Basically, they're just saying, get us off this lawsuit. Simple as that, dude. Like, they're like, get us off this lawsuit. I don't have any idea why we are included in this. This doesn't make any sense. We have nothing to do with this. Just because we distributed UFC content does not make us privy to contractual relationships established by the UFC with independent contractors, which are the MMA fighters. That's essentially what they're saying. Okay, what I really wanted to read was, here we go. Okay, this is where I really wanted to get to. Okay, so here's the background, right? Like this right here, background. Okay, so this is where you really get into the meat of this thing, where this picture starts to shift, in my opinion, in the direction of the UFC. Okay, and I'll tell you exactly why. Like I'm saying, like the UFC should. I don't know about should. Like I said, I shouldn't make any judgments. Bottom line, I haven't seen the plaintiff's side like this. But here's, again, I'm going to read. The complaint presents a single count of monopsonization on behalf of a putative class of UFC fighters. The case is alleged to be virtually identical to the prior class action brought by the plaintiffs in Lee, asserting a class period of December 16th, 2010 through 2017. The case seeks to extend, okay, this is all stuff that we talked about, but hang on, I'm there, okay, right here. Okay, here. The complaint alleges that UFC embarked on a supposed campaign beginning as early as December 2006, including by purchasing other mixed martial arts promoters in 2006 and 2011 and using standard agreements with fighters since the early 2000s that allegedly locked up and access to top fighters, making it impossible for actual or potential rivals to compete effectively with UFC. The complaint contends that through UFC's exclusionary scheme, the UFC has illegally acquired, enhanced, and maintained a dominant position in the market for purchasing professional MMA fighter services, which has injured putative class members by artificially suppressing bout compensation. Okay, so here's the deal, dude. Here's the deal. Why did those organizations sell their companies to the UFC? Okay, UFC bought Pride, correct. Why? Because Pride was in such a strong position. They were just killing it. Like, everything was going great. And then they were like, you know what? Let's just sell to the UFC. Or Pride got exposed as having been in bed with the Yakuza. They lost their network deal and thus the majority of their value. And in distress mode, they sold to UFC. That's what happened there. Okay? The UFC didn't put them out of business. They were on their way out, and UFC bought a distressed company that very much benefited them. Strikeforce. Was Strikeforce profitable? Like, was Strikeforce profitable? This is the key thing that I want people to seriously understand, okay? There has only been one profitable mixed martial arts organization that I am aware of, and that is UFC. These other ones that were paying much more are not making money. They're losing money. And that's the case without exception as far as I understand it. If Bellator just gave their company away, okay? They took stock. They took a little bit of stock in PFL. According to the guys at PFL, a not very big piece of stock. PFL, now obviously they're starting to build, but they just had a pay-per-view that probably sold 11 buys. Okay? How many tickets did they sell? Did they sell out? No. Did the UFC just sell out the Austin Moody Center? Yes. Okay. Until there has been another successful organization, and you can't say it's because UFC locked up all the talent. That's not true. Pride had just as much talent as UFC back then. Pride fell apart. UFC didn't do that to them. UFC didn't do that to them. So where I struggle is like, if you can show another organization that has made a lasting long-term business out of this sport, and the UFC is literally just using really nefarious, contractual terms to lock people in, then maybe. But look, like, I have obviously seen the other side of this coin up close and personal. With Francis. I saw how, like, the extensions and all that stuff, with Francis, it was like, but he did get out of his contract, right? Now, I realize Francis was one of those like first generation guys who had a sunset clause. Okay. So, you know what? I'm not even passing judgment in either, in any direction. I know it sounds like I'm like supporting the UFC. Like I said, I have not seen the other side of this case. But the UFC side does not seem like it's on shaky ground here. You know, they're like why would the UFC? And here's the other thing about them like lowballing Nate, and people are, oh my God, look, you said he's lowballing him. Dude, are you fucking serious? This is business, man. That is every negotiation since the inception of monetary trade for services. Okay, like that is negotiation. That's what that is what negotiation looks like. You think you come in, you're all, dude, I think that, you know, I think we should pay him $20,000. No, let's pay him $100. It's like, why? They're all, well, I just think like I'm just feeling generous. You know, we're doing so well. Let's just start paying guys much more money than they can get other places or that they're willing to accept. I mean, listen, dude, the thing that UFC was doing with Nate Diaz right there was a risk. Like if they were going to stick to that number. Now, obviously, you know, when you play that, as I'm like critiquing that negotiation, they knew that Nate was still under contract for them. Okay. So like Fertitta, there's two different people who are talking here. Okay. Like who's smarter, Joe Silva or fucking Fertitta? Obviously, Lorenzo Fertitta is operating at a level that is 100 times higher than Joe fucking Silva. Okay. So when Lorenzo says stick to that number, he's not saying that, he's not like in his mind, he's not like, oh yeah, we're going to stick to that number forever, no matter what. Lorenzo puts that offer together, right? And he's like, okay, but look, share this with him. You know, and in his mind, he's not thinking like that this necessarily makes sense. He is putting something out there that maybe Nate will accept. You know, I mean, like Lorenzo knows it's not a good fucking deal for Nate, obviously. But he also knows that if he does reject the offer, he still has time to offer him more money because he still has another fight under contract. It's not like if he turns it down, he could just go turn around and go sign with Strikeforce. They have him under contract for another fight. So all the way up until when he fights his last fight on the contract, they can still negotiate with him. So Joe Silva might not understand that. He's like, yeah, I lowballed him. And like, as a matter of fact, Joe Silva clearly doesn't understand that, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. Is like you have Lorenzo here and you have Joe Silva here. Joe Silva says, okay, yeah, we'll put that out there. And if he doesn't take it, we'll stick him on the undercard and we'll devalue him. Lorenzo is saying, stick to this number. And in the back of his head, I know what he's thinking because it's what I'm thinking. Lorenzo's smarter than I am. I'm just smarter than Joe Silva, clearly. I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm saying stick to this number. But if he rejects it, then we can still negotiate with him. I'm not going to say that to Joe Silva because I don't trust him to be able to properly negotiate, knowing that he has a bigger bank back there to offer him more money. I would rather have this dumbbell who I have as my matchmaker think that this is the best and final offer because it increases my likelihood that Nate will take the deal. Now, me, Lorenzo, Dana, we know we'll offer him more money if he doesn't take it. But we don't need this front Dunsky to know that because we want him to communicate that this is the best and final. Okay, so that's what's really going on. When you read between the lines of that email, and I realize like everybody's, oh, look, they lowball. If you really want to understand what's actually going on for the big boys, that's what's going on. Anyway, that's what I got. Love you guys.